Jabril Robinson was murdered May 16, 2016 in Clayton County, Georgia. Officer Charlie McDaniel radioed for backup, in which Dwayne Parkins was dispatched to the scene. Once Dwayne Parkins arrived on the scene, he came in contact with my son and immediately shot him in the back of his head.
Harry Baxter Jr. was killed by Oakland police on January the 16th, 2011. He ran up the street, and the neighbors of seeing him run up both streets, and they said he was zigzagging, and they were and there was a guy chasing him and shooting at him, and he hit him in the back with a bullet, and Kerry fell to the ground.
Marquise Jones was killed by San Antonio police. On that day, I was getting ready for work, and I saw there was a shooting at Chacho's and Chalucci's around 5 in the morning. And I remember saying they need to close their restaurant down because it is always someone being killed there. There's always fights there, always this. And I see the yellow chalk tarp, and I say, Lord, bless their family. I could hear my sister crying, who is Marquise's son, saying they killed him. I remembering I could not breathe. I could not catch my breath.
Jacob Dominguez was murdered by San Jose Police Department on September 15, 2017. Officer Michael Pena, part of a covert response unit, on unmarked cars, no sirens, no lights, plainclothes officers boxed in Jacob, killing him within 20 seconds of having him contained. No de-escalation. After he was dead, they put in the canine to maul up his throat.
My name is Montye Benjamin, the mother of Jayvis Benjamin, who was killed by Officer Lynn Thomas of the Avondale Estates Police Department on January 18, 2013. Jayvis was not looking in the direction of Officer Thomas. He was engaging with the people in the community. Officer Thomas began to move backwards. Jayvis then looked in his direction. At this time, Officer Thomas then shot Jayvis twice, once in the heart and the other in the lower abdomen with his hands raised.
My name is Adrienne Hood, the mother of Henry Green V, who was killed by 2 plainclothes police officers here in Columbus, Ohio, June 6 of 2016. Many of the witnesses that were outside said that the officers never identified themselves. They jumped out the vehicle, all while firing at my son. My son, Henry, was shot 8 times from a total of 22 bullets that were fired at him. And he lay on the sidewalk and took his last breaths.
My name is Janet Baker. My son was heinously murdered by someone who was supposed to serve and protect him. When I wake up in the morning, my son is the first thing on my mind. When I go to bed at night, I labor. Did I do the right things? Did I make the right calls? Did I align myself with the right groups? Did I speak out for justice enough? Or did I say the wrong things? Did I somehow hinder getting justice for it?
My name is Geraldine Brown Bluford, the mother of Alan Dwayne Bluford, who was killed by Oakland Police Department officer Miguel Masso on May the 6th of 2012. Alan, who was not under arrest, not read any Miranda rights, began to leave. As he was walking away from the scene, the police officer turned off his lapel camera and began to chase Alan. Alan was running, according to witness statements, yelling, "I didn't do anything." The officer took out his weapon, shooting himself in the foot. Alan heard the gunshot and fell to the ground with hands up. According to witness statements, the police officer walked over to Alan as he was lying on the ground and shot him in his chest 3 times.
My name is Sheila Banks, the godmother and auntie of Corey Jones that was killed by Newman Roger, October 18, 2015. Police officer Newman Roger approached him, and within a few seconds or so, Corey was running for his life. He was shot at 6 times. He was hit 3 times. And boy, I tell you, our lives have never been the same.
My name is Kathy Scott Lights, mother of Jarvis Lights, who was killed by a Georgia State Trooper on December 29, 2017. They stated that Jarvis exited his vehicle. There was no body cam or dash cam to confirm this statement. It was reported that Jarvis attempted to return back to his car when Officer Nolan attacked him from the back of his body. Jarvis came back up out of his car after he found what he was searching for with his arms raised in the air. State Trooper Nolan stated that he didn't know what that object was in Jarvis' hand, and he shot Jarvis in his right upper shoulder arm. And the object that was in Jarvis' hand was his cell phone, which was found next to his body after he had been shot on the ground, bleeding out.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here this afternoon. Welcome to our Voices of Struggle and Hope, Mothers Speak Out on Police Brutality, a series of online dialogues that have been happening all of this week, twice a day, started November 14th, and will go on till the 18th until 7 p.m. tonight is the last dialogue. So if you haven't been able to chime in, be sure to chime in this evening. This is the 9th of the 10th dialogues that will, of the 10 that we will be holding in total. So thank you so much for everyone for being here and great attendance today. Excited that everyone is here. The MAPB fellows that are participating each night will share their direct experiences of losing a child to police violence. Their stories are the first person truth to all of the police shootings, behind the 1,000 of police shootings that we know happen every year in America. And often the mother's voices and the family voices are silenced unless that particular shooting goes national. So in these dialogues, you will have an opportunity to hear 10 unique stories, and you will go away with knowing 10 victims of police brutality. So when you protest and you advocate for against police brutality, you now not only have the victims that made national headlines, you will have 10 other victims to advocate for. I'm Colette Flanagan. I founded Mothers Against Police Brutality in 2013 when my only son was killed by a Dallas policeman. Clinton was only 25 years old, father of twin boys. Clinton was shot 7 times, 5 times in the center mass, 1 time in his left arm that was raised, and then the last time close range in the back. And Clinton's killing contained almost every dimension of the current crisis in the United States in policing. My son was a Black man, and a Black person is 2.5 times more likely to be shot to death by the police. My son was unarmed, and yet he was perceived by a fully armed white officer as a lethal threat. This officer escaped all criminal accountability for killing my son. No charges, no trial, no damages, just scot-free. This year, MAPB has two major initiatives that we have worked on, taking the issue of police violence and extrajudicial killings to United Nations. Our organization is working with working groups within the United Nations, human rights and the High Court Division. And I am just recently back from Geneva, participating in the United Nations 52nd Human Rights Council session. This work is important at this level because police brutality is a global problem that needs global attention. And our second initiative is our fellowship program, which I'm very proud of. Our MAPB fellowship program is a leadership program, development. It's a program that we are operating in 10 cities, and out of hundreds of applicants, the 10 fellows that you will spend time with or have spent time with this week telling their stories were chosen to be the first MAPB fellows. Out of many, many applicants, these special women were chosen to lead in the MAPB legacy program. The fellows are women who have endured the loss of a child or a loved one to deadly police violence, police brutality. Each has a track record of advocating for their martyred children or loved one and organizing for change in their hometowns and in their community. The MAPB Fellowship Program is a key component in continuing the development of our national network of families directly impacted by police violence. On the panel this afternoon is Montye Benjamin, who is an MAPB fellow. Monty's son, Jayvis Benjamin, was killed by Avondale Estates Police on January the 18th in 2013. Montye has advocated for Jayvis since he was murdered by the police in 2013. Thank you so much for being here today, Montye. Just thank you for your courage. The panelists that are joining us today are Dr. Vanita West and Dana Miller Pike. Dr. Vanita West is a culture consultant, leadership strategist, nonviolence trainer, and good neighbor. As the principal owner of Go West Consulting, she facilitates experiences and produces content inclusive of social media, podcasts, website, training, and speech content proposed to connect, transform, and engage people for good. She is the pastor of Our Neighbor's House and senior nonviolence trainer for the Martin Luther King Jr. for Nonviolent Social Change at the King Center. That's in Atlanta. As current president of the board for Fly Life, a girls mentoring organization, Dr. West is fulfilling one of her key goals, which is to positively influence the holistic health of youth. She is an educator who helped found a computer and professionalism school in Liberia, West Africa, where she resided for 2 years. With Dr. West's leadership, Our Neighbor's House is building a 2-story, 26 classroom educational center in Liberia, with classes scheduled to begin in fall of 2024. Dr. West, thank you so much for being with us today. We are honored to have you as a panelist today. Thank you for your amazing work and your activism. Tell us a little bit about your work. I know that you have an impressive broad spectrum of work in the African American community, as well as in West Africa, which is very impressive. Tell us a little bit about your work.
Thank you so much for welcoming me. I'm grateful to be on this panel and to be invited by Montye, who joined us at the King Center a few years ago for nonviolence training, and who invited us to join in the work that she was doing to combat police brutality. So it's my honor to be on the panel and to greet you on behalf of the King Center CEO, Dr. Bernice A. King, who was otherwise engaged, but sends her greetings to you. Yes, I packed a lot into these 46 years. I started some of the work that I do now as a teen in Tuskegee, Alabama. I grew up in Tuskegee, which is a different experience. I didn't just go to a HBCU. I lived in an HBCU town. So I was able to experience a lot about Black books and African-American culture. And when I got to college, I studied a lot of things that other students had not studied, and it had an influence on me. I read Dr. King's letter from Birmingham jail in the 11th grade. My teacher, my public speaking teacher, assigned me to read that, and it changed the course of my life. I started to study Dr. King and be very concerned about what's happening with young people, and graduated college and moved to Atlanta and started working with a national service program here, which is a program where we went into inner city Atlanta schools and did tutoring sessions and ran free after school programs. I found out I did not want to be a teacher after that year of service. I did want to continue to serve young people. And eventually I started to develop more content to train young people on leadership and on Dr. King's philosophy. And I met his daughter and came on board at some point at the King Center as a director of education and training. And that caused me to continue my work. And in that capacity with the King Center now as senior trainer, we've held several sessions with community members and law enforcement, just trying to stop this killing of our young people, particularly our young Black youth and older Black people too. It's not just young Black people, but trying to figure out the why and get to some solutions is very important to us. We've done this work in Minneapolis. We've met there we've met with several leading leaders from agencies and departments in Metro Atlanta. And we're just discovering the different reasons why and just really trying to be supportive and on our social media platforms, amplify the horrors that are happening. Just recently in Georgia with a young man who was accosted by police in his holding cell in Georgia and beaten on camera. So real problem, and we can't say it's not relative to race. There's really something happening. And Dr. King has some thoughts on that, everything from Bernice King, from the things that the statues, the placards that police practice with are usually dark and what that does psychologically. So again, I'm grateful to be here to discuss this and to hopefully continue to help be a part of the solution.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you again for being here. Our next panelist is Dana Miller Pike, is a longtime activist, artist, teacher, social worker. Dana has 30 plus years experience in grief work and dismantling systems and institutions of racist oppression. Her career is taking her from in-home hospice care in underdeserved neighborhoods to Dallas County Jail, and in recent years, the movement against police brutality. She is a passionate believer in the creative art, street theater for social change, as well as lifelong learner. Dana has a love for volunteers and is grateful to work with Mothers Against Police Brutality. And she's being very low key in her bio here, but Dana has taken our volunteer program of over 300 people and created a very awesome volunteer program. And we're grateful to have her on her experience, work with the mothers, and grateful to have her here today. Thank you, Dana, for being here. Tell us a little bit about how you've been able to embed your love of art and social worker experience in helping impacted families, police violence.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. I appreciate that introduction. You know, as a lifelong social worker in Dallas, I've just, been involved in a lot of street theater projects, things that bring a message, bring things home that way. It's one of the ways I initially met Miss Flanagan here. And I'm just here and ready to learn and listen and honored to be here. So thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Dana. Thank you for being here. Okay, we're going to start with Montye. Tell us about Jayvis and who he was and what he enjoyed in life.
Jayvis was that joyful, playful. He was the youngest within his siblings of his generation. And with that being said, there was like a 10-year difference between them, and that they kind of look at him as being their own, but yet he was little brother. He was that one that was a member of the family that did everything to make everybody happy. He was real playful. He liked when we have, we called it Sunday Soul Food, where my siblings would come up from Savannah and we would cook dinner together. And then my male siblings would go to either Falcon games, but we would occasionally have those gatherings. He would be that one that would always wanted to either play dominoes, spades, or whatever, just to get the competitive side of everybody coming together. And far as the things that he liked to do, he was very passionate about production. He started the church ministry at the age of 12, and he was working with the ministry where he later became certified as a production and audio engineer. With that passion he had with the church, he was able to later move out to other churches as well, and he became certified within the church, which allowed him to work professionally as an audio engineer. He also was a devout artist, and his favorite artwork was graffiti. He can draw as well as his elder brother, but he, again, his passion was the graffiti side of it. Well, Jayvis worked with the local Mapleton Boys and Girls Club, and what he did from while he was working there, he built the stages. They had a Playhouse Academy. It was called the Community Playhouse at the Boys and Girls Club in Mapleton, Georgia. And while he was there, he initially built the stages. And I would say less than a month prior to him passing, he did a play with the kids between the ages of 8 and 12. And they initially, the question of the theater that they put together was, how did you feel when Trayvon Martin was killed? So Jayvis had built the stage, and he had the kids that were in the program to draw their own picture stating how they felt. And what he did was, in the mural that he made for those kids to participate in that play, he put their pictures around the face that he drew of Trayvon, stating the kids' view on the show. After him passing. but what he did was align the actual mural with the kids' pictures expressing how they felt when Trayvon Martin was killed and everything. So he also did other stages and plays and props as well. He also, outside of that, he worked with his uncle has a company where they do murals and they do vinyl wraps on cars. So not only that, it was just so many things that he was into. And he also was a student at Georgia Perimeter College, as well as he was a mass communication major. And I mean, it was just so many venues that he pretty much could go into. But I was very adamant to him that I wanted him to get a college degree, because my thoughts was that they can take anything from you being a Black man, but they cannot take your education. And so I was very adamant about that. So he wanted to prove to me that he can also be well employed, legally employed without a college degree, but almost to the point that because his siblings were older than he was like my right side, my right half, whereas he felt my guardian, yet I was the parent. So he would, pretty much be very protective of me as much as I was protective of him. He had got so used to my constant speech when he leave out that you can't find trouble, trouble will find you. You don't have to look for trouble, trouble will find you. And then not to mention in the community that we lived in, he was constantly escorted from his, he would come home from work, he would get off the bus, and the distance from where bus stop was to where we live, the police would actually escort him, where they would constantly want him to show him putting a key in the door, because the neighborhood we was living in, it was predominantly white at that time. And they would constantly follow him and harass him in that sense. But at the end of the day, the person that he was just very playful. He was very, a lot of my community outreach activities that I do within it as well, he participated, and he would always be right alongside me with doing that, because we work with Chris Kids, the Ludacris Foundation, along with Hosea Feed the, at that time it was Hosea Feed the Hungry, but now it's Hosea Help. And then we also work with Rabbi Village of Hope, where I was the program director for homeless pregnant teens, where I was enrolling them into school, getting them housing and whatever it was needed for them to sustain themselves, coming from that. But again, he was just that playful, joyous type person that it just kind of floored me to even deal with that. The fact that he was taken out the way that he did. I constantly preached to him that he didn't have to look for trouble, trouble would find him. Yet the very people who I had expected, I'm not naive to the actual, how would you say, the actual culture of law enforcement. But at the end of the day, there was a part of me that, but it just kind of crushed my spirit that it was law enforcement that actually took his life, instead of it being, not that I belittle any other death or, abusive situation, but it just kind of floored me that it would be law enforcement to take him out. And then under the circumstance and as to how it was done, for him to be that person. And then not only that, his classmates on a daily basis are reaching out to me, because a lot of them did not even know that he was killed and murdered. Before last, I marched in the Martin Luther King parade with the families of police brutalities. And there were several of his classmates that, it kind of made me become extremely emotional, because they began to scream out that they could not believe that he was actually killed because of his activity within the community and the people that he worked with. So again, he was just that person that no one not to say that I'm in particular, no one would have ever expected this be a turn of about with his life being snuffed out based on, I would say, ignorance and racism. So yes, that's who Jayvis pretty much was for me.
Thank you so much for that, Montye. When a person is killed by the police, he or she is typically portrayed in a negative way. In most cases, their lives are so rewritten by the police department as a way to substantiate the killing. And so the victim resubmerges as a completely different person. Their characters are assassinated and obliterated. A mother and family members can hardly recognize their loved one or a child by the police department's description or the media's portrayal of them in the aftermath of a shooting. So we always want to ground our reflection in the lived experiences of families who suffered this horrible crime. And we have to take back the narrative of our loved ones. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. I know that this is probably very hard, and it's usually hard for mothers to relive, but we can't stop telling our stories. And I know that what I'm going to ask you next may be a little difficult, but can you tell us how Jayvis's, what happened on, I'm sure, the most painful day of your life, when you learned that Jayvis had been murdered? Can you take us back to that day?
Okay. What I would actually do is actually go to the day before as well.
Okay.
On that night, Jayvis had called me and we had a very lengthy conversation. Being that the person that he is, he didn't really stay on the phone with me too much. I was always the one that was tracking him down. Well, the night before, he initially called me. At the time, he had moved in with his cousins who had an apartment on Kensington Drive in Decatur, Georgia. And the apartment that they lived in was less than a mile from the school, Georgia Perimeter School, where he was attending. But at the time, he was still recovering from an incident that happened on the night of the election for Obama. And so, again, he moved in with his cousins. That night when he called me, he was telling me about his classes, what he was doing. He was also employed by this church, Welcome Friends Baptist Church, Pastor John Smith, and that how he was working there and how he was enjoying working with the people. Well, at the time, he had his cousin's baby that he was keeping, and the baby was crying. And I was trying to tell him, I said, it's nice that you helping to assist, babysitting with him and everything. I said, but if you need to come back home so that you can do the things that you need to do for yourself. And he was like, no, Mom, he didn't want to come home. He said it was time for him to take care of himself and be responsible for what he needed to do. So again, that conversation, he didn't share with me, which I treasure as a gift. That night he said to me was that he was grateful for everything I did for him because he saw the sacrifices I made to allow him to get to that day. And so from that, I treasure that till the end of my days based on what he said. So going into in that conversation, we discussed, because he was on my phone bill. So we were going to meet on Friday to, that we was going to meet at this place called Crystal Blue because he liked to collect the crystals. He wanted to give me the money to pay for his bill. So his cousin who had the apartment, based on him babysitting the child, it was agreed that he was going to be allowed to use the car so that he was going to meet us to go. So from that last conversation, that was what had the night before. Well, the following day, it was like any other day, the usual. I was keeping my grandsons, and another young baby as well. And so when they all came over, it was that later on that afternoon, right before about 5 o'clock that evening, I received a call from his aunt stating that Jayvis had the car. So I was like, okay. And so they, kind of gave him an ultimatum to the fact that he needed to return the car before 6 o'clock. But yet this was about 5:30. So they apparently was calling Jayvis. He had the car. And between them calling the car, it was said, I didn't witness that phone call, but he had a conversation with the grandfather at 5:30 to return the car. And with that being said, I went from there till I kept calling his phone as well. And then it was later that they told me that Jayvis didn't have his phone with him. His phone was at the apartment. What had actually happened, he had left with the car to go pick up his check so that he can cash it and then give me the money. Well, from there, later on, the grandfather called me at about 7:25. When he called me at 7:25, all he said on the phone, he did not say anything. All he said was that, what was Jayvis' legal birth name? Then from there, he asked me what his legal birth name, and then he also went on to say that the car was expensive and that he was not allowed. He was not a, I would say he wasn't allowed to drive the car, from my understanding, from what he was saying. And so from there, that was the end of the conversation. No one told me that Jayvis was deceased at that time. All the grandfather was particularly discussing was the value of the car and that he could lose his insurance and whatnot. So from there, that was the end of that conversation. So I went on with my evening, and it was long after, it was, I would say, about 12:50 that night. I was over one of my coworkers. A lot of us, my coworkers, we would come together and, sit around and talk, play cards and whatnot. So from there, we were sitting around talking. So then my phone rang, and Jayvis' biological father had called me. And when he called me, he said, Montye, Jayvis is dead. And I was like, what are you talking about? He's dead. This call came in approximately 6 hours. He was dead. From reading the autopsy report and reading the time of the shooting, he was actually shot between 4:30 and 5:15, and he was pronounced dead at 6:10 that afternoon. So for me, the grandfather knew that Jayvis was dead prior to giving me that call, asking me, did he have asking me for his for his legal name. So from there, it was just one question after the other for me, because the way it was presented over the media on the news where I was at, my family didn't know that it was Jayvis that they were talking about, but over the media, they basically said that somebody was carjacked, somebody stole the car, carjacked, and assaulted an officer, and that there was a high-speed chase. So from there, I just knew that that wasn't Jayvis, based on what they were telling me. So that night was very interesting because I kind of felt like I was in a tunnel, because I still not grasped the thought of his dad saying that he was dead. Because at the time when he said, was he dead, I took my phone and I threw it up against the wall, because I was like, you done lost your mind. Ain't no way in the world nobody call me and tell me my child dead, when I know I had talked to him the day before. So from there, it was just going backwards and forth with me getting back home. And then my sister, me and my sister, we lived together along with Jayvis in the house that we lived in. I was just kind of dumbfounded. I couldn't even function, whereas my sister and my eldest son, Stephen, went to the, they told us that his body was at Grady Hospital. They went to Grady Hospital, then Grady Hospital said that no, it wasn't at Grady Hospital, it was at the coroner. Then they said it wasn't at the coroner, that it was with the GBI. Because Jayvis was in a part of a police-involved shooting, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation had his body as evidence. And then not only that, far as the actual officers, it was the Martin Luther King holiday weekend. So I was told that I could not view or identify his body until that Tuesday after the holiday weekend. So from there, that was a struggle because we was going backwards and forth, and I got to give it to the actual medical examiner, because he did, after my sister repeatedly, along with my son, contacted them, what he did was he went into the office, though it was closed, and he allowed me, my sister, my son, and my niece, and all of us. What he did was took a picture of Jayvis from his chin to his forehead. And with that picture, he allowed me to identify that it was actually Jayvis. He told me that he could not allow me to touch his body because he was considered as evidence to the police. So from there, that was a struggle within itself, because it was like, I wanted to at least just touch my child one more time, but they would not allow it. So after leaving there, later that same evening, that Sunday, it was either Sunday or Saturday evening, the investigator from the GBI had called, and what he said to me had my mental thoughts spinning. It was just going 100 miles an hour, because he said that he could not discuss the case because it was under investigation by the prosecutor as well as the police department. But he advised me. I mean, he said, I strongly advise you, pretty much how the jury turned out. He strongly advised that I get all 3 copies of the video as to how Jayvis was killed. So from there, I just knew it was more to the story than what the police were saying, because they was basically telling me that Jayvis had done beat up. The actual representative from the police department was on a call with me and my sister, 3-way, stating that Jayvis was this big black male that hovered over Lynn Thomas, and that he feared for his life, and that was the actions of why he actually shot and killed him. So me and my sister was really puzzled, because we was like, Jayvis hovered over him, in thought. So we went from that with the GBI. Basically, he just kept insisting that we get a copy of all 3 investigations, the police department, the prosecutor, as well as the GBI. The GBI listed it as a homicide by another male. And with the prosecutor, that was an interesting situation within itself, because it took him 2.5 years after Jayvis was killed to actually have a grand jury hearing. And with him having that grand jury hearing, he knew within the city that within the state statute of limitation that you have only 2 years to file a wrongful death as to any other charges as well against the officer who shot my son. Well, he initially waited till those 2 years expired. And then during those 2 years, he did not assign a case number. A case number was needed in case, I was to get my own private investigation, as well as me requesting open records, FOIA records, as well as it applies to the case itself. But again, the prosecutor, the former Robert James of DeKalb County court, he initially held on to that, and every time someone would attempt to get information, his ongoing word was that, one, he was dealing with a high profile case. At that time, it was the Burrell Ellis case, which there was some issues dealing with the city government. And so he would always have a messenger tell me that he would get back with me in 30 days. I went through this process for exactly 4 to 5 months. And again, they kept delaying it. So finally, my son, Stephen, did a mock tribunal at Georgia State University, where they had other families whose sons and daughters were killed by the police. And with them doing that tribunal, they had the different families had the officers who killed the son, and they had them laid out. Well, it became news to the media about what was going on. And in that same tribunal that they had at the school, that's when the prosecutor had contacted the attorney that I had at that time, stating that he wanted to meet with me so that he can carry Jayvis' case to the grand jury. So from there, I met with him. Well, I didn't meet with him. I actually had a conversation. They assigned me a victim witness advocate. And then from there, they set up the grand jury hearing. After setting up the grand jury hearing, the prosecutor offered me a 10-minute impact statement on Jayvis' behalf. So I was able to be in on the grand jury hearing from the beginning to the end. And during that hearing, it was just, I mean, everything that I was taught in school, because I was a criminal justice major. And I was just floored because, you know, you try to trust the government, you try to trust the judicial system, but there were so many conflicting, and I mean, I just can't even go into details of all the craziness that they were doing. But anyway, went into the grand jury hearing. When we went to the grand jury hearing, there were 6 views of where Jayvis and how he was killed. What actually happened, Lynn Thomas saw Jayvis. He was sitting at Miss Lynn Thomas was sitting at a red light, and the light turned green. Well, Jayvis ran the light, and I guess he panicked when he saw Lynn Thomas. So he went on into the neighborhood of Avondale Estates. Lynn Thomas was on the radio, and he was talking to dispatch, and he said, "This guy's going 120 miles an hour." So he told the dispatch, he said, "Well, I'm going to go see where he at and see what's up with him." And that was the conversation he had with dispatch. Well, once he arrived on the scene, Jayvis had an accident. He had hit a white car, and he ended up hitting a telephone pole head on. Once he hit the telephone pole and everything, the car that he hit had sealed the car in on the driver's side, from the bumper all the way from the front bumper to the rear bumper. So the door was smashed in. So Jayvis had to knock the glass out of the way in order to climb up out of the car once he hit the telephone pole. Once he climbed out of the car, before he climbed out of the car, Lynn Thomas arrived on the scene, and you can see in the dash cam videos during the grand jury hearing, he was patting left, right, trying to decide whether or not he was going to pull his gun or if he had a taser. I don't know what else he was going to pull, but instead he had already snapped the gun, pointed it to Jayvis' head while he was sitting in the car. So as Jayvis began to climb out of the car, once he got out of the car, he got out. Once he was, flat on his feet, he had raised both hands, and he kept saying, "Do y'all see what he's trying to do to me?" The reason for him saying that is because when he hit the telephone pole, he knocked the power out in the area. With him knocking the power out in the area, the residents, the people in the community started coming out of their home because the power was knocked out. So they all saw what initially happened. When he stepped out, he had his hands up, and he kept saying, "Do y'all see?" Because he only communicated with the people. He didn't have any kind of communication with Lynn Thomas. So as he looked around and he had his hands up and he said, "Do y'all see what see what he's trying to do to me?" He said it 3 times. And on the 3rd time when he said it, he turned in the direction of Lynn Thomas. When he turned in the direction of Lynn Thomas, that's when he then shot him. We were always told that it was 1 shot, but after reviewing the autopsy and as well as a conversation I had with the funeral home, he was actually shot twice. He was shot in the heart and he was shot in the lower abdomen. So from there, Jayvis had dropped to the ground, and once he dropped to the ground, you could hear him moan like 1 or 2 times. And then you could see the other backup officers come running up, and they took the gun from Lynn Thomas, and he was like, "It happened so fast, like what he kept saying. We were able to see all of this during the grand jury hearing. But when we actually went to the court to file the wrongful death, they sent a totally altered, they cropped out Lynn Thomas, they cropped out the front of the car, the back of the car. They only showed Jayvis, and they showed it with one hand up, one hand down. And so we were floored because it was nothing like what we saw during the grand jury hearing. Now, during the grand jury hearing, they initially cited, incited that Lynn Thomas, they strongly advised indictment. And that was on April the 30th, 2017. On May the 1st of 2017, the former DA, Robert James, announced that he would be issuing a criminal warrant for his arrest. But instead, he waited a year later and overturned the decision of the jury and made the shooting justified, stating that within the state of Georgia, they are entitled to cite qualified immunity. So not only did the city of Avondale Estate, but also Lynn Thomas cited qualified immunity, stating that based on the amendment of Stand Your Ground in the state of Georgia, he was entitled to use that, whatever you want to call it, on his behalf because he was working for Avondale Estates Police Department. So again, that was like, it was one mental roller coaster after the other, as far as the case itself. And so since then, we have, me and my family, we have since then, 6 months after the former DA had made the shooting justified, he then, the city of Avondale Estate promoted Lynn Thomas, skipping rank from sergeant to chief on Jayvis' birthday, September the 2nd, 2017. And what's the most crazy part about it was having to deal with the fact of what I was taught in school. And then not only that, to know that he wasn't certified as a peace officer to be a chief to begin with. But again, within their own community and their own system, that's what they later did. Well, on last year, September the 5th or 7th. Prior to that, my sister and my daughter and nieces, they made these postcards and they mailed them into the city council, along with a young man by the name of Royce Mann, who then had a protest outside of the city of Avondale Estates Police Department. They mailed those postcards with Jayvis history on it to everybody that was a part of the city council. Once they saw those postcards and they started inquiring about the situation, from there also there was a news reporter, his name was Tyler Estep, who also investigated the city of Avondale Estate, which we were later able to find out the percentage of arrests of Black and brown people in that community. I mean, this is a lengthy story because I've been fighting this fight for more than, it'll be 10 years this coming Martin Luther King holiday weekend. So again, it's just, it's a whole lot more, but we were able to get him. They forced him into retirement because he could not pass the certification as chief. And then not only that, they also terminated the city manager as well. My argument with that is he should not have been allowed to retire because now he's maintaining not only his certification, but his retirement. So he's receiving his pension and living well while my son is sealed up in a box. So again, it's a whole lot more that I can disclose, but to me, those are the major parts that I wanted to share at this time. Thank you.
No, thank you for that, Auntie. This is your space. This is your panel. This panel is dedicated for you to tell your story without someone telling you you have 3 minutes or 5 minutes. And that's what often happens to families and mothers. They don't get the time to tell their uninterrupted story. As you say, of course, there's more, but just having this space to be uninterrupted, that's what these panels are about. And your panelists are here today to support you in any way, if that means 3 minutes for them, 2 minutes or 10 minutes. So we appreciate you telling your story in your space. So thank you so very much for that. And thank you for your courage and your continued fight for Jayvis.
I wanted to add one more thing as well.
Sure.
The major part of me, a great part of me inviting Dr. Vanetta as well as Dr. King was because of me meeting. What happened at the time, a group of mothers in Atlanta were invited to the King Center, and we was asking Dr. Bernice, how can she help us? Some families were there for monetarily requests, but my request to Dr. Bernice was that I wanted her to become a bridge between the community and the church, because a lot of us got shunned so badly and were told that your child had to have done something because they were killed by the police. Within that meeting, Bernice explained to us that she could not assist us monetarily, which I wasn't expecting that, no way, but that she offered us to take the 365 nonviolence class for all of the families that were involved, detail the walk of her father as it involved police brutality. So with that being said, me and my eldest son, Stephen, attended that class. And that's how, not only that, we were church members, Dr. Vanetta as well as Dr. King, but outside of being church members, we became, I would say, almost family after attending the nonviolence 365 class as well. So she knows a lot more, she knows about me and as well as my sons. So that's another reason why I invited her as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it was an excellent choice. And it sounds like that you were able to get some degree of healing and meeting Dr. Bernice King and Dr. West. And Dr. West, I want to go to you now, and I want to ask you, as you do this work and you met Montye's family, and we hear about her talk about the indifference that was shown to her family. And, it reminded me of some of the things that my family went through, not being able to see, touch a body, which is nonsense. You can put on gloves. It's just another way to alienate and to tear you down and to mold you into a mess so that you're not fighting the city in these issues. And in your work, I'm sure that you've seen a lot of these indifferences, but as a faith leader, how do you best support families in situations like Montye?
And one of the most important things to do is to listen, to hear. Montye shared some things today that I've heard her story, but some of this she shared today I had not heard before. Just the continued trauma, not just the initial trauma, but the way she found out, that her son, his life was valued less than a car. Things like that you hear it and it's still so unimaginable. And then that she's saying, people from her faith tradition shared, essentially made her feel as though her son had to do something wrong to be killed by police. And, usually when we hear these stories, there's nothing a person could have done to warrant the type of ways that they're violated and hurt. And I just always, I hear it and I think, we just need to change our expectation for how we engage each other as human beings. That even if somebody has made a mistake somehow, nobody deserves to, unarmed, in a situation, be shot down. And what are the ways that people can be trained to, even if they have to defend themselves, to do it in a way that they don't kill? So there's just a number of questions I continue to have as I was listening to Montye. Just thinking about our families, how sometimes the alternative should be not to call the police on people, the things we have to consider now that probably have become more prevalent since Jayvis died, that we now know, hey, that doesn't warrant calling the police. Let's think about how we can save our brother or sister's life. Let's think about some alternatives, some different things we can do. When as she was talking, I just kept hearing, we need to be more of a family.
Right.
We need to be more concerned about each other. And it's not even a matter of putting ourselves in somebody else's shoes, because I can't, I don't have, as I listen to the two of you today, I don't have the experience, or even if I had a son and he died the way that your sons died, it wouldn't be the same, because we're different people and we deal with things differently. You feel differently than I do. So I just try to listen and hear. And that's what the King Center does when we have, as we were so honored to have Montye and her son, we were able to listen. And I just wish we had more spaces like this where people could hear a mother just talk about life without her son, how she found out about it, how, it shouldn't have happened that way, and how his life could have been spared. And to hear her courage that she's taken this horrible situation in her life, and you've taken a horrible situation, unimaginable grief, and transcended it and are using it to try to stop it from happening to other people. I just think that that's a powerful story that you shouldn't have to live,
Absolutely.
a courage you shouldn't have to have.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Dr. West. I always say that the family voices are not heard enough. Why the MAPB Legacy Program was created, to put mothers, to give them a stronger voice in their community, to put them at tables that we can put them at, and not just be there as an organization, but say, okay, yes, we want to collaborate with you on this, but we have some mothers in your area that you need to be talking to, and teaching them to go beyond and around the grief, if they're willing to do the bolder things that have to happen, because a mother's voice is like no other. And it's these 10 women are really amazing.
What you just said is key, because I think about the difference between like Tamir Rice's mother, who decided on a path where she didn't want to be kind of at the forefront sharing these stories, but you also have mothers who are handling it differently. And all of these decisions are to be respected,
right?
Because none of us are experiencing exactly what that mother is experiencing. So I just think, the value in hearing, listening, even when somebody's not saying something, this is this mother's decision for how she wants to handle it. And in particular, just hearing what's happening with mothers. It seems that mothers have really positioned themselves after these tragedies to be activists and to step into some very courageous spaces.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree. Thank you so much for your voice today. I want to chime in with Dana now. Dana, I want to ask you, because you have so much experience in trauma, which is such a unique space in this movement, that and you and I have had many conversations, how many mothers, after this happened, you can't sleep, you can't eat, you can't work. It traumatizes the family, and quite often when we hear about other shootings that happen, it's like re-traumatizing all over again. It's like a nightmare on loop for most families. Tell us a little bit about what, even in your vast experience, once you start working with police, victims of police violence, some of the things that you've learned and how you've been able to embed it into your experiences and help families.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Ms. Benjamin and Dr. West. I'm so grateful to both of you and to you, Colette. One of the things I noticed right away, having worked with just kind of folks who had losses, but then when I became involved in this movement, I noticed right away how different the grief was. And I think that I've predominantly traced it back to that public narrative about the child. And so I just kind of want to piggyback, the moment that they murder your child, they start acting as though your child deserved it. And that adds a lot of shame to the grief. And so, just in terms of thinking about healing, I'd like to just piggyback a little bit on what Dr. West said. For example, you take Jayvis. Those folks who knew Jayvis knew that he worked with kids. He was an artist. He was an important member of his community. And that's the narrative that combats the lies that are immediately told. And so I think for healing, we don't heal separately. We don't heal individually. We heal in community. And so just knowing one another and being able to, form those relationships and seeing all the mothers as I have come along here and begin to support one another in ways that nobody else can. I really think that that's the full circle of healing right there.
Thank you so much for that, Dana. We are at the end of our program, and this has been so amazing. Montye, I know that this is, you've had some tumultuous moments. We've traded emails back and forth, and to see your constant courage I am in awe of your courage. And even when you're having your lowest day, just remember that there are many moms such as myself that are in awe of your courage. And thank you for the fight, for staying in the fight. I know there are many times that you don't want to be in it. And I've been in that space before. Thank you for sharing Jayvis's story with us today. And I hope that you feel that you had some special time and special space to do that, unfiltered. And I just want to tell you that I am very glad that you're an MAPB fellow. I look forward to more amazing things from you. Dr. West, thank you again for supporting this amazing family, and thank you for your courageous work. Thanks everybody for being here in support of Montye today. Tonight is the last session at 7 p.m. Tune in if you can. We've had some amazing audience attendance, and we're really excited about that, to be able to get the stories out, and we have to keep telling our stories and give the families a platform and the space to do it. So I thank each and every one of you, and again, Dana Miller-Pike, for being here and bringing your expertise to the table. Is there you want to take a few seconds, Montye, to say something before we close?
I want to say thank you to everyone that's on my panel, Dr. Vanetta, as well as Dana, and you too as well, Ms. Colette. And then I'm grateful to actually have this time to actually share. And like you said, the best part about it is someone being interested in listening instead of, detailing it to their expectation. So I'm very grateful in every essence of being a part of the fellows as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Montye. And thank you again. And everybody, enjoy your weekend. And each of you, although you were here in the space today, if you have time to sign on tonight and support the last fellow and her dialogue, feel free to do so. Thank you again, everyone.